Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, GCPIT. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and I'm very excited about the topic. I think it's very important, not just for women and women-owned businesses, but I think for the corporate environment as well. It's if we're going to build an economy and a future that's inclusive, it's important that women also participate in corporate supply chains and everything. I just would like to echo the statements by the previous speaker, Ms. Rajeshiri. I completely agree. I think over the last year, we've seen a lot of resilience, innovation, and strength shown by women within the economy and women within the business space. And I'm very happy to be giving a voice to those women and women-owned businesses. They've been able to show, creativity and the ability to bounce back really quickly in spite of all the difficult, the difficult situation that we find ourselves now as a community. So just to echo those statements and to say that, I'll be giving this as an overview of my presentation. Again, like I said, I'll be speaking on increasing the participation of women in corporate supply chains. I'll start off by speaking about women in the economy, then I'll go on to give a little bit of background or context on, to describe what corporate supply chains are, the different features, the rationale for outsourcing tasks and things like that. And then I'll go on to discuss different ideas on pathways to deepening women's participation in this corporate supply chains. So to start off, we have the World Bank recently released their Women, Business and Law report. Actually, I think this was released this week on the 1st of March, if I'm not mistaken. And the feedback is positive. I think one of the interesting insights are that we have made progress in the last 50 years, and I think this is a welcome and a little motivating for people. But there are challenges in the sense that we still have a number of businesses and a number of economies either between 50 and 75, with very few above the 75 mark, and even more, between 25 and 50, ranking between 25 and 50 amongst the businesses and within the Women Business and Law Index there. So although progress has been made in the last 50 years, more still needs to be done, and more economies need to take action, to move women, to implement reforms that are favorable to women in business. That also being said, I think this just captures the same thing I just, shared or just discussed. We have, but divided by region. So we have different regions performing differently and making reforms at different levels within their economies. Again, although progress has been made, it has been slow. And I say all this to come to this particular point, which is that COVID did have a gendered effect on our economy. We know that women, and by this figure here, we see that women, even just employment, are affected very differently from men within the workspace. We have more women having to leave jobs or having to leave full-time employment in order to maybe tackle some of the dual roles that they have to play within their communities. That is that of either a businesswoman or a business leader, or their roles as primary caregivers within their households or within their communities. We've also seen that because a lot of the impact of COVID, the economic impact of COVID was hard or on certain value chains or within certain industries. And especially when those industries have a larger proportion of women-owned businesses. As an example, we know that services sectors are 57% of women are employed within the, employment within the services sectors is about 57% for women employees. And the service sectors, a lot of the service sectors were hard hit by the shutdowns, the lockdowns, the restrictions of movement and things like that. So again, by implication, more women were affected by the COVID and the impact that it had on our day-to-day lives. In fact, there we see that the UN reported that 47 million women and girls were pushed into extreme poverty. And so basically, this all just goes to say that if before we were moved by the need to act, I think after this year, we see that there's an urgency, even a stronger urgency, to not just act, but to act quick, to implement reforms and take actions that are, that move us even further along and bridge that gap for women's participation within the economy. That just being said, and to say that, I'll just come to this point. I really think that corporate supply chains can be a powerful tool to do this. Women within corporate supply chains are able to employ more people. And we also find that I think there's a factor that says women also are more likely to employ more women. So there's that domino effect in the sense that you employ one woman-owned business and she goes on to employ at least between 50 to I would say 30%. Again, this is just, it's not measured, but from my experience, you see that these businesses go on to employ about 50% to 30% more women within their supply chain. Therefore, you're bringing more people within within more women into the economy by giving women-owned businesses these opportunities. So corporate supply chains really can be described as a full range of activities firms engage in to bring in products from its conception to its end phase. It usually differs per size of the firm, per location of the firm, per specialization of the firm or the service that is required. And the tasks usually support production, processing, and trade functions of the particular firm in question. The rationale behind why corporates expand their supply chains, it really differs. It differs on the size of the firm. Sometimes the thinking or the decision to outsource or to procure a particular service could be to streamline production, to reduce cost of production, to fill in a particular gap in terms of specialized skills or knowledge that is required to do a specific task. And sometimes it's the size of the project. So sometimes firms just have this huge project that they need to deliver on, and they need extra hands, or they need to expand their workforce, or in order to fulfill a particular contract. So these are some of the reasons why corporate supply chains either expand contracts or why they procure new services, why they're able to absorb new services to act. Like I had just said, these corporate supply chains can range between localized chains, regional chains, or international chains. And we also find that, studies have shown that right now, global trade, corporate supply chains can, trade flows between about trade flows right now are happening within global value chains. So there is, again, to emphasize the point that it is very important for women, if we're going to be active, or if we're going to be proactive in bringing women into the economy, using global value chains and increasing their participation in these global value chains is of tremendous value to them as women and as businesses as well. But there are challenges to this. We see that sometimes the scale of the required contract is a little bit could be burdensome for a small business, or just for a woman-owned business, a small business, just to emphasize that. Because a lot of the time we see that there's a lot of the small and medium-sized businesses are also women-owned and managed, especially within the developing world. And as such, their ability to navigate large contracts or complex contractual requirements can be difficult for them. Simply because of the size of their firm, complex and flexibility of the company procurement system, strict financial, labor reporting, and health standards and safety standards may be difficult for them to meet as a small business. And this also, poses a restriction, and access to bargaining power, access to market prohibitive norms, especially when the industries are very male-centered or male-leaning. We find that these social norms can be a huge restriction to women-owned businesses accessing these corporate supply chains. And that being said, the restrictiveness of the above challenges, of course, will differ in each industry. So for certain industries, maybe prohibitive social norms might not be the case because it's already acceptable that women perform or act within that space. So it's a little easier for them to get access to a specific chain. But in certain cases, especially for instance, if we take an example, the extractive industries or the oil and gas, we find that for those particular sectors, they're usually male dominated, and as such, women's participation within that space is already very limited. And it might be a little bit difficult for them to gain access into those particular male-centered, perceived male-centered industries. So again, just to say that the restrictiveness of each, it's of any of these points will really depend on the industry and the environment in which the woman and the women-owned business is operating. So there's certain pathways, there's certain things that we can do to deepen the participation of women and women-owned businesses within corporate supply chains. There are government interventions that I like to highlight, corporate actions that we can take, and also the role of women-owned businesses. So what can you do as a woman-owned business to better place yourself for corporate, to participate or increase your access to buyers that are corporates? So for the government, I think public procurement can also be a powerful tool to increase women's participation in the corporate supply chain. As an example, subcontracting plans. So basically, if you require if governments can make policies that require their suppliers, government suppliers, to have subcontracting plans that target and develop plans, that will integrate women-owned businesses into the suppliers, implementation of the particular contract that they win during their bid. So this is one strategy, because although you might not be directly, providing that, especially when it's a small business, so although you might not be directly contracting out to a woman-owned business, by influencing the supplier's supply chain or corporate chain on who they go on to employ to deliver on certain tasks, then you're able to bring more women within the corporate environment, and also encouraging more corporates or private firms to, increase their pool of women-owned suppliers or women within their supply chain. Another way is by mandatory. This is a bit hard, but it's about mandatory supply diversity targets and standards for corporate bidding for government contracts. So including within your bidding contract as a government, the need or mandatory requirements for the number of women that need to be participating within the supply chain, either as a woman or women-owned businesses, and their representation and certain standards on, how you treat those women and things like that. So that might be another way in which the government can influence corporates and private firms, contracting more to women-owned businesses within their individual industries. And there are other policies as well that target women either as women business owners, employees, or business leaders. For business leaders, probably requiring them to employ, increasing like a quota for the number of firms that you take on as the government that have women within the executive. There are also ways in which you can require that maybe improve the ecosystem for women-owned businesses in general, so that they're better equipped to bid and to compete for corporate contracts. And also, put in place policies and laws that address, and reforms that address certain social, cultural, and legal barriers that reduce the chances of women participating in corporate bids for contracts and things like that. For instance, now this report that I was referring to found that on average, women have 3/4 of the rights as men. This is something that needs to be addressed, because basically it means that the environment we need to look into the environment, the ecosystem for women's rights, so that they can be, better empowered to participate in these corporate chains. There are also financial constraints that women-owned businesses, in terms of access to finance. We find that 108 economies still lack legal provisions that expressly prohibit gender-based discriminations on access to finance. We also find that 75 economies still do not have legal rights to inheritance and property management for women-owned businesses. This means that women would not have collateral, which is a huge determinant for their ability to get loans, which will be a huge determinant for their ability to get the financing that they need to finance these huge contracts that corporates will probably be loaning out and things like that. So I think it needs to be taken into consideration. Other points are transparency. We need requiring higher standards for transparency from the business community. So to be able to better understand where women are placed within different industries, we need better gender disaggregated data, and to throw more transparency on basically what they're doing and how the environment could be better improved for their participation within corporates or between supply chains in general. Another way, there are certain things that corporates can do for themselves, like for instance, a transparency of the procurement process. We had identified the complexity of certain procurement systems could make it difficult for a small and medium-sized enterprise that is women-owned to access these procurement systems. So providing better transparency to your systems, the different steps on how to access it, making it clear so that they're able to navigate it on their own and not need, so they're able to better navigate the system on their own. Supply diversity programs that target women-owned businesses. This could range from skill development to policy advocacy, gender approach to market research. So also understanding the market in which you're working in, so that when you're developing whatever supply diversity program, or when you're, sending out or developing your contracts, you have market-based information on the kind of impact that particular contract may have on the women within your sphere of influence as a corporate. So that's one thing that you can do, gender benchmarking as well. So also requiring and putting within your corporate institutions certain targets that you want to reach and meet as, or indicators that you want to use to measure your progress as a corporate in developing or making your business more gender-friendly, gender-sensitivity programs for your procurement officers. Like I said, a lot of the times, because especially in industries that are very male-centered, a woman operating within that space may come as a shock, even though it shouldn't, but these things happen. So educating your procurement officers on gender sensitivity so that they're able to know how to engage effectively with women as women leaders, and also as women-owned businesses, to understand the challenges and to be able to, design those contracts in a way that are reflective of those specific challenges that women-owned businesses face. For the women entrepreneur, just to close, for the women entrepreneur, what's important is that you know your ecosystem. I think it's important for you to know the actors within your space, especially those actors that are very active in promoting women's participation within their supply chains. So we see that there's an increasing trend of corporate organizations developing supply diversity programs or specific programs to, make their environment or their chains more inclusive. So advise you to seek out information on who is active within your space within those particular areas, and how you can get access to those particular companies. And that's a way in which you as a company, as a business can get in. Networking is also extremely important. It can be difficult, but I think that if you're able to network with other women-owned businesses, then you can leverage on your collective knowledge as women-owned businesses, because then you can pull together your resources, your know-how, your skill, and be able to bid for contracts that ordinarily you may not have been able to do on your own. So leveraging on your collective network, and in order to leverage on your collective knowledge, you need to have a strong network of women-owned businesses within your industry. And maybe not just women-owned businesses, but also your male counterparts within the industry. So you can partner with them in bidding for contracts and getting access to these corporate systems, especially when they're already familiar with the system that you're trying to get access into. And then, of course, research. Research into your market, research into the participants within the market, into the best ways to get access, into how to improve your offering so that you better meet the requirements of these corporate institutions, because a lot of the time these corporate companies do have specific, not a lot of time, all the time, they have specific requirements that they will need you as a supplier to fulfill. And if you don't have that knowledge, as difficult as it may be, to able to access it or to make time to, independently learn, it's important that you make researching your potential buyers a priority for you as a woman-owned business. So I'll just leave it at that. Those are the certain pathways that I'll encourage or advise on, or those are my thoughts. There are certain things governments can do, corporates can do, women-owned businesses, again, can also do to improve their participation in corporate supply chains. Thank you very much for your time. And I'll just stop here.